Hola, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos al Cofre de Miguel. Hoy debutamos con serie documental nueva en el canal. Revolviendo mi cofre encontré que tengo los 6 capítulos de una serie producida en el año 1996 que se llama Sex and the Silver Screen. Trata sobre el sexo en el cine, sobre todo estadounidense. Son 6 episodios y nos va a mostrar todos los avatares que tuvo que sufrir la industria cinematográfica para saltear los vericuetos de la censura, sobre todo en Estados Unidos. En esta primera parte que veremos hoy, se va a hablar sobre el periodo mudo. Veremos actores de la talla de Rodolfo Valentino, Gloria Swanson, Pola Negri. Se verá el caso famoso del asesinato que comete Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle y que le arruina la carrera, uno de los más conocidos actores de la etapa muda de Hollywood. Y si les gusta esta parte del documental, les recomiendo fervorosamente que vean la película Babylon, una película que fue estrenada el año pasado, protagonizada por Margot Robbie y Brad Pitt, donde se cuenta un poco el mundo de este cine, del cine mudo de los años 20 en Hollywood. Bueno, espero que les guste. Este es el primer episodio, son 6. Y bueno, los que les gustan los documentales de cine ya saben que este canal tiene mucho de eso. Sigo subiendo la serie Movie Magic y seguirá viendo documentales sobre algunos directores. Entonces los dejo con la primera parte de Sex and the Silver Screen.
Since Adam and Eve first walked the Garden of Eden, man has used every means at his disposal in an effort to capture the wonders of human sexuality. And with the coming of the 20th century, a bold and new invention ignited the imagination as never before: motion pictures. This seductive combination of shadows and light provided artists with an unprecedented opportunity to examine the mysteries of mankind's most basic instincts. While audiences gaped, censors condemned, and in the dark recesses of America's movie theaters, a sultry vamp became the silver screen's first sex symbol, and a chic stirred the passions of women's hearts the world over. Amidst cries that these flickering images were evil, an industry was born, and a boomtown called Hollywood became the film capital of the world, synonymous with sin, scandal, sex, and the silver screen. Ooh.
I consider that the greatest mission of the motion picture is first to make people happy, to bring more joy and cheer and wholesome goodwill into this world of ours. God knows we need it. Thomas Edison, inventor of the moving picture.
While initially captivated by the magic of the moving image itself, early audiences quickly grew tired of such wholesome efforts as George Méliès's Trip to the Moon. Something was lacking, and it didn't take long for the first filmmakers to figure out that the missing ingredient was sex.
Gentlemen, today's receipts from our 14th Street arcade indicate the following earnings. U.S. battleships at sea, 25 cents. Rip Van Winkle's Sleep, 45 cents. Lady on a Tightrope, $3.65. Boys, I think we had better make some more of the Lady on a Tightrope kind. Chairman, American Mutoscope and Biograph Company.
Thanks to the viewing apparatus, these first moving pictures were dubbed peep shows. Secretly savor the forbidden pleasures of Egyptian belly dancers and German muscle men. In 1896, all that would change. On April 23rd, Thomas Edison would use his Vitascope projection system to introduce the May Irwin kiss. Overnight, the motion picture was transformed from private diversion into public experience. Never before had a moving image of such graphic intimacy been publicly exhibited. Civic leaders were outraged.
The Irwin kiss is no more than a lyric of the stockyards. Neither participant is physically attractive, and the spectacle of their prolonged pasturing on each other's lips is hard to bear. Magnified to gargantuan proportions and repeated 3 times over, it is absolutely disgusting. Such things call for police interference. Herbert S. Stone, Chicago Magazine editor.
Public demand for the May Irwin kiss was so overwhelming that it spawned a host of imitators. A few broad-minded citizens even sprang to its defense.
Kissing has been a custom time out of mind. That it should now be pronounced indecent is to open the eyes of the world to a flaw in something they had always held to be without blemish. New Orleans Idol.
In the early years of the 20th century, Europe dominated the world of art, literature, and in particular, film. These rarely seen hand-tinted motion pictures represent the cinema's first attempts at color photography. Europe's artistic heritage had long embraced nudity, and that tradition was to extend into the age of the moving picture. From 1904 to 1906, the French studio Pathé released a series of films under the general title, Naughty Subjects of a Piquant Nature. These films represent the cinema's first foray into sexual exploitation. Meanwhile, in America, the rising popularity of motion pictures was of grave concern to church and civic leaders. Movies, they feared, offered a trip to hell for only a nickel.
The average 5-cent theater does not have a single thing to commend it. Most of them are evil in their nature without a single redeeming feature to warrant their existence. Not a single thing connected with them has an influence for good, The proper thing for the authorities to do is to suppress them at once. Chicago Tribune.
Distressed by films like Beware My Husband Comes, How Bridget Served the Salad Undressed, In Her Boudoir, and College Boy's First Love, the guardians of public decency waited for an opportunity to strike. That chance came in 1906 in the ample form of a belly dancer named Fátima.
Unless the law steps in and does for the moving picture shows what it has done for meat inspection, the Nickelodeon will continue to inject into our social order an element of degrading filth. Young Men's Christian Association.
In response, Chicago became the first city in the nation to adopt an official censorship policy. The chief of police was granted the authority to inspect all motion pictures and censor those he found objectionable, including Fatima's serpentine dance.
I have instructed my men to take a human interest in their work and to take note of just what effect these pictures have on the minds of children. Police Chief Shipping.
In New York, moving picture producers encountered similar criticism.
Children support the picture shows at a cost to their little souls and bodies and minds that no one can compute. The records of the children's courts sadly prove that this new form of entertainment has gone far to blast the lives of girls and has led many boys to criminal careers. New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children.
Viewed in the festering immorality of a darkened room, the Nickel Picture Show had entered the realm of the forbidden. In December of 1908, New York Mayor George McClellan declared,
because of the serious opposition presented by the rectors and pastors of practically all the Christian denominations in the city, and because of the further objections by the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, and evidence that pictures tend to degrade or injure the morals of the community, I do therefore order that each and every license issued by me for a motion picture show be hereby revoked and annulled.
By 1912, motion pictures had graduated from side street Nickelodeons to Main Street movie palaces. With this newfound respectability came wider, more well-read audiences, and producers discovered a new way of injecting sexuality into their stories, the vice film. At the turn of the century, New York City had been rocked by newspaper revelations of a white slave trade flourishing in its midst. The story of this market for human flesh was so provocative and titillating that Carl Laemmle, president of the Universal Film Manufacturing Company, was moved to produce an epic cinematic expose. Traffic in Souls would attract 30,000 customers in the first week, each paying the astronomical sum of 25 cents. Soon, 28 theaters were showing the film in New York City alone, where it took in nearly $500,000.
I saw an advertisement in a New York newspaper the other day, attempting to scold me because the Universal Manufacturing Company produced Traffic in Souls. This is the old story of the dogs barking at the moon. They are peeved. They wonder what Universal will do next, and when they find out, they are bitter because they didn't think of it first. Carl Laemmle.
In the beginning was a love story. In Genesis, Adam met Eve. In the movies, boy meets girl. Into this pastoral garden, a serpent was soon to slither. Theda Bara.
Miss Bara is pestilence herself. Her monumental wickedness would not have been tolerated by Caligula. She is divinely, hysterically, insanely malevolent. Betty Davis.
It was 1915 when Miss Bara first appeared on America's silver screens. The picture was Fox Studios' box office sensation, A Fool There Was. Inspired, by Rudyard Kipling's popular limerick, The Vampire. The film tells the tragic story of a chaste elderly gentleman who falls prey to an irresistible vamp.
I have never gazed into a face betraying such wickedness and evil. Miss Bara belongs to what we in the medical profession term the wide-faced muscular type of people whose bones are governed by the same muscular system as the serpent. New York Doctor.
For movie audiences in that age of innocence, Theda Bara was their first real taste of blatant feminine sexuality. In the hands of a studio publicist, Theodosia Goodman, a self-described nice Jewish girl from Cincinnati, became a sneering, malignant vamp.
Theda Bara is the wickedest woman in the world, the bastard child of an Egyptian sheik and an Arabian princess, weaned on crocodile milk and born in the shadow of the Great Pyramid. Adept at the black arts, the letters of her name rearranged spell Arab death. Fox press release.
The femme fatale of the flickers, Theda Bara made 40 films over the next 4 years. Whether in Cleopatra, Serpent of the Nile, and Siren of the Ages, or in Salome, Daughter of Darkness, she was said to represent the entire art of vampirism.
I am the embodiment of a secret dream. What difference does it make where I was born? Who knows? Who cares? I'm going to continue doing vampires as long as people sin. Theda Bara.
As the movie's first sex symbol, Theda Bara proved conclusively that both men and women would pay vast sums of money to see an actor project a highly sexual image, a fact that alarmed the cinema's burgeoning reform movement.
I would rather have my son stand at a bar and drink 2 glasses of beer than have him see that vampire woman. He may get over the effects of the beer in a week, but he could not forget that woman until he was 80 years old. The Reverend Wilbur Fisk Crafts, film reformer.
Around the world, across the ages, the naked figure appears in many guises. From civilization to civilization and century to century, the controversy over human sexuality has been unrelenting. From Renaissance to Reformation, art revealed manners and morals. In the 17th century, the magic lantern enticed the viewer with flickering sideshow images of a flagrant nature. In the 1800s, as the tintype evolved into the photograph, the camera shed new light on the forbidden. With the invention of the motion picture camera, viewers were able to witness graphically sexual behavior as never before. At the turn of the century, the existence of risque films such as these were solely the subject of whispers and innuendo. Made primarily for private consumption, these productions were rarely seen in the United States, outside of the plush brothels of New Orleans.
I am going into the picture business. Today I met my old friend, Mark Dintenfass. He is the dumbest man I ever knew. If he can make money in pictures, anybody can. Louis J. Selznick.
by 1915, the movies had moved west. In the wide open spaces of California, directors finally had the sunshine and elbow room they needed to tell their epic stories. Over the next 10 years, Hollywood was to become synonymous with motion picture production and eventually motion picture decadence.
Washington, December 10th. The lobby of the International Reform Bureau, Dr. Wilbur Crafts presiding, voted tonight to rescue the motion pictures from the hands of the devil and 500 unchristian Jews.
In March 1915, the fledgling reform movement was handed a stunning victory. The Supreme Court ruled the motion pictures were not protected by the Constitution of the United States.
The exhibition of motion pictures is a business, pure and simple, organized and conducted for profit, not to be regarded as part of the press or as organs of public opinion. They are mere representations of events, of ideas and sentiments, vivid, useful, and entertaining, no doubt, but capable of evil, the greater because of their attractiveness and manner of exhibition. Justice Joseph McKenna.
Empowered by this landmark decision, censors in Maryland, Virginia, Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania reached for their scissors.
Forbidden are scenes featuring pandering, prostitution, white slavery, strumpets, and houses of ill fame, the seduction of women, habit-forming drugs, nudity, knifings, abortions, birth control, light treatment of the church, fornication, and adultery, honeymoon scenes, drunkenness, gunplay, sensual kissing and lovemaking, lewd dancing, men and women in bed together, venereal disease, and lingerie displays. Pennsylvania Board of Censorship.
Unfortunately for producers, each state board had its own criterion. For example, Kansas refused to allow women to smoke on screen. In Ohio, they could. In Pennsylvania, the portrayal of pregnant women was taboo, but not in New York. Missouri drew the line at bootleg liquor and nose thumbing, while neck kissing was outlawed in Maryland. Virginia's board banned indecent kicking, and in New York, the publicly elected censors forbade any disparaging remarks about politicians.
Today, the censorship of moving pictures is seriously hampering the growth of the art. Had intelligent opposition been employed when it first made itself manifest, it could easily have been overcome. But the pygmy child of that day has grown to be a giant whose forces of evil are so strong that he threatens that priceless heritage of our nation, freedom of expression. D.W. Griffith.
Stung by attempts to suppress his landmark production, The Birth of a Nation, pioneer director D.W. Griffith was among the first in the movie colony to publicly protest the rising tide of censorship. After publishing a pamphlet entitled The Rise and Fall of Free Speech in America, he set about creating a motion picture to elaborate on his feelings. Intolerance would encompass 4 separate but interwoven stories, each linked by the common theme of love's struggle throughout the ages. Fearing the audience could not follow the film's intricate structure, Griffith's backers insisted the story needed more sex. For the sequence known as Belshazzar's Feast, legend has it that Mr. Griffith personally toured the seamier side of Los Angeles in search of women willing to bear all in the service of history.
It was one hell of a wild party. A real orgy, naked people and all. Griffith assisted.
Ironically, the most graphic of the nude scenes was later censored and replaced with semi-closed versions shot by the director's assistant. Ultimately, the worst fears of the film's backers were realized. Intolerance was a commercial disaster. The First World War was the largest and costliest conflict in history. The United States reluctantly entered it in 1917 to make the world safe for democracy. over 5 million soldiers lost their lives in the trenches, and the war to end all wars left in its wake a world in disillusion.
Here was a new generation, grown up to find all gods dead, all wars fought, all faiths in men shaken. F. Scott Fitzgerald.
With Germany's surrender, America once again reveled in its national birthright: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was to Hollywood's optimism and opulence that a battered people turned for inspiration. Motion pictures afforded a glimpse into a world unsullied by death and destruction. No one understood this better than the son of an Episcopalian preacher, Cecil B. DeMille.
There was a sickness that infected the whole post-war world. The germ of that sickness was older than Prohibition, older than World War I. Theologians call it original sin. Cecil B. DeMille.
Mr. DeMille's male and female examined marital fidelity in an upper-class household. An immediate hit, it was shocking enough to be banned in a number of cities. It was also the first movie to feature what would become Mr. DeMille's trademark, the bathroom.
The bath has become a mystic shrine dedicated to Venus, where the art of bathing is shown as a lovely ceremony, where foaming bubbles and mysterious ointments replace plain soap and water.
What Mr. DeMille had discovered was titillation in the guise of glamour. Ravishing high society women, most often portrayed by Gloria Swanson, were forever stepping out of silken robes and into the tub, giving the audience a tantalizing moment of calculated concealment.
Gloria is a sullen, opaque creature, unknowable, but as enkindled as a young lioness. Film historian Adela Rogers St. John.
For women the world over, Miss Swanson was glamour itself. Her gauzy negligees and form-fitting camisoles sparked new trends in ladies' undergarments. The epitome of Hollywood royalty, Miss Swanson lived life much as Mr. DeMille portrayed her in his movies. For relaxation, she lounged in her black marble bathroom, soaking in a gold-plated tub. Her living expenses topped $10,000 a month, including 4 secretaries, a full-time press agent, and servants for her Beverly Hills mansion, Manhattan penthouse, and country estate. By 1920, Gloria Swanson was Hollywood's reigning movie queen.
I decided that when I became a star, I would be every inch and every moment the star. Everybody, from the studio gateman to the highest executive, would know it. Gloria Swanson.
Rivaling Miss Swanson for the public's affection was a mysterious European immigrant, Pola Negri. Her performance as the sultry gypsy in Spanish Dancer captured the imagination of an entire nation.
This Negri is amazing. She can do more with her face than most people can do with a subtitle. There is a passion in her performance. It is sex sharp, sure, terrific variety.
One can imagine the emotional havoc Miss Negri wrought upon the American male when she confessed to wearing nothing whatsoever under her evening gowns and to sleeping nude with a revolver under her pillow. Reputed to be artful in the ways of love, she once told a reporter,
"Great men have always loved me." Pola Negri.
Miss Negri's on-again, off-again love affair with Charlie Chaplin would play itself out in the nation's press.
A great deal has been written about my relationship with Charlie Chaplin. Unfortunately, much of it was written by Mr. Chaplin himself. I would prefer to excuse him on the grounds that all clowns live in a world of fantasy.
Draped in emeralds and chinchilla, she rode through Hollywood in a white Rolls-Royce trimmed with ivory and upholstered in white velvet. Other stars could match the opulence, but none could handle Pola's style. Film historian Richard Kozarsky.
The infant cinema had grown with astonishing speed. In a handful of years, the motion picture industry had transformed itself from a shabby fly-by-night operation into a vast complex of studios and theaters. Hollywood became a fantasy kingdom, one that celebrated a new breed of royalty, movie stars. Nightclubs and restaurants, Rolls-Royce dealers and furriers all did a booming business, catering to the flourishing film industry. Unfortunately, this also applied to drug dealers, bootleggers, and prostitutes. Orgies, suicides, dope addiction, and murder. These seemed to be the very lifeblood of the movie colony's existence. Hardly a day passed without the nation being assaulted by headlines trumpeting yet another Tinseltown scandal.
Bert Cornell, prominent in motion pictures, was arrested and charged with assault. Anna Francis claims she applied to Cornell for employment in a new film production as a vamp. While posing in an apartment, she alleges that Cornell gave her something to drink which stupefied her, and while stupefied, he then assaulted her. Variety.
On September 6, 1921, the party came to a crashing halt. That morning, San Francisco's newspapers carried reports of a wild party gone terribly wrong. Hosted by America's favorite funny man, Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, the bacchanals sprawled through 3 adjoining suites at the St. Francis Hotel. The papers breathlessly described how the merrymaking was interrupted by screams emanating from a locked room occupied by Fatty and a young starlet named Virginia Rapet. After breaking down the door, the guests discovered Virginia, naked and barely conscious.
I'm dying. He broke me inside. I'm dying. Virginia Rapet.
4 days later, she did. On September 12, 1921, Fatty Arbuckle was charged with murder.
They'll never convict him, but this will ruin him, and maybe motion pictures also. I cannot take the case, but prepare Hollywood for tornadoes. Attorney Earl Rogers.
The publicity from the trial and rumors that Fatty had raped Virginia with a soft drink bottle brought forth a storm of public criticism.
Fatty Arbuckle had drawn down the lightning on us all. Scandal hung on like a fever through the fall and winter as his series of trials stretched out. Trials in which the evidence was considered so vile, so unspeakable, that much of it was passed around silently in typewritten notes. Gloria Swanson.
All I want is for the public to withhold its judgment until the jury of 12 men and women has decided whether or not I am guilty. Fatty Arbuckle.
Fatty Arbuckle was the last straw. The American public, well aware of movie star salaries and lifestyles, was fed up. All across the land, voices called out for filmmakers to repent and reform. In the United States Congress, the motion picture industry was denounced as a hotbed of drunkenness, ribaldry, and free love. 31 state legislatures were considering censorship bills. In Hollywood, it was time to batten down the hatches.
Censorship is not the answer, for the same reason that decapitation is not the recommended remedy for a headache. It is the industry's job to police itself, subject to the ultimate court of public opinion. Cecil B. DeMille.
Terrified at the prospect of federally mandated censorship, the major studios banded together and formed the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America.
The Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America realize the necessity for attaining and maintaining the highest possible standard of motion picture film production and are striving to have the industry accorded the dignity to which it is justly entitled.
Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America.
The association wanted a respected figurehead, someone beyond reproach who could assure the outraged nation of Hollywood's intention to clean up its act. They offered the job to William H. Hayes, Postmaster General and a Presbyterian elder, along with a salary of $100,000 a year.
I realize that I am entering a gigantic field, of which I know little. It is a tremendous undertaking, and I approach it with much concern. Will Hayes.
The general, as he liked to be called, immediately rallied his considerable clout and persuaded politicians of both parties that censorship legislation was ill-advised.
The processes of democracy are long and slow and often discouraging. But I have always believed that the principle of self-regulation will take firm root if given a chance. If watered by patience and optimism, this principle will at length flourish and prove lasting. Will Hayes.
Meanwhile, back in San Francisco, Fatty Arbuckle's troubles appeared to be over. After 2 separate hearings, each of which ended in hung juries, the Prince of Wales was finally acquitted. Virginia Rapay had died of a botched abortion. The jury took less than 1 minute to reach its verdict, and the judge declared that the case should never have come to trial.
Acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle. We feel a great injustice has been done to him. We wish him success and hope the American people will take the judgment of 12 men and women that Roscoe Arbuckle is entirely innocent and free from all blame. Jury Foreman.
6 days after Mr. Arbuckle was freed, Will Hayes, in one of his first official acts, ordered Fatty's films banned. Treated like a leper by the industry that had once made him a king, Fatty Arbuckle would die several years later of alcohol and heartbreak, a forgotten man. The motion picture industry had weathered its worst storm. That summer, in the newly constructed Hollywood Bowl, Will Hayes addressed his once wayward flock for the first time.
This industry must have towards that sacred thing the mind of a child. Towards that clean virgin thing, the same care about impressions made upon it that the best clergyman or most inspired teacher of youth would have.
With this speech, the general put the industry on notice. He would work for them, but he was no man's mouthpiece. Mr. Hayes knew that left to their own devices, the producers would stray from the primrose path once popular indignation had subsided. He therefore instructed filmmakers to submit to his office any play, book, or story being considered for production.
It is vital that we exercise all possible care that only books or plays which are of the right type be used for screen presentation. Will Hayes.
Not everyone in Hollywood was pleased with these events. Charlie Chaplin hung his welcome banner over the men's room door. But Will Hayes was here to stay, and with him came the law of compensating values, which dictated that sin could be shown, but it must always be punished. For many filmmakers, the Hayes formula was too good to be true. For the first 6 reels, their pictures would be hotbeds of sin, as long as the sinners were punished in the 7th. No filmmaker embraced the law of compensating values as successfully as Cecil B. DeMille. For the climactic prologue to his 1923 version of the 10 Commandments, the flamboyant director staged one of the most elaborate orgies ever put on film, all in the name of biblical accuracy.
I am sometimes accused of gendering up the Bible with large and lavish infusions of sex and violence. I can only wonder if my accusers have ever read certain parts of the Bible. Cecil B. DeMille.
Virtually every male star of the silent film era pales into insignificance at the mere mention of the name Rudolph Valentino. No man before or since has so completely captured the imagination of the opposite sex. Women fainted at his screen appearances, and decades after his death, veiled admirers still make the pilgrimage to his gravesite in Hollywood's de Longpre Park. With the opening of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the Latin lover became a living legend.
I keep asking myself, is this fellow really acting, or is he so perfectly the type that he doesn't even need to act? D.W. Griffith.
With his patent leather hair and smoldering eyes, Rudolph Valentino was the male version of the vamp.
I think, or perhaps I should say more humbly, that I hope that I see beauty when and where beauty is to be found. And certainly I know that where and when I find beauty, I worship it. Rudolph Valentino.
Here was a man who both used women and abused them, danced with them and flung them aside, loved them and laughed in their faces.
Just because a woman is a woman, I do not acclaim her with beating heart as a masterpiece from God. When a woman is beautiful, she is a miracle. When she is not, she is a woman, and her lack is her misfortune.
Rudolph Valentino was the only male star in the history of film whose persona was exclusively sexual. His habit of kissing women on the palm rather than the back of the hand, the way his chest heaved when consumed by passion, the manner in which he turned away tight-lipped when nearly overcome, all conspired to make him the most desirable man in the world.
You've heard of various animals hypnotizing others by their slow, rhythmic motions of their bodies. Just so does Valentino charm all those who come under his influence by the wonderful perfection of his every movement. Hollywood columnist.
Off-screen, his effect on women was equally hypnotic, as Pola Negri soon discovered.
I was a novitiate, being led in a ritualistic dance by some overpowering feline. In a trance, I felt myself glide into his welcoming arms and whirl across the room. The sensation of his voice breathing in my ear caused a tremor of sensuality through my whole body. There was no longer any possibility of escape. We were destined to be lovers. It could be neither avoided nor questioned. Pola Negri.
The torrid affair between Rudolph Valentino and Pola Negri would rival the great lover's most tempestuous screen romances.
A heavy rain beat soothingly against the windows. The only illumination in the room came from the dying embers in the grate. Two figures, sated with love, lay on the bed. It was as if courtship sprang from the gratification of the senses, like a blessing conferred upon two who had met in a perfect act of love.
I worship you, Polita.
Valentino and his world were a dream. A whole generation of women wanted to ride off into a sandy paradise with him. At 13, I had been such a female. Betty Davis.
In 1926, while in New York to promote his new film, Son of the Sheik, Valentino was rushed to the hospital, suffering from a burst appendix. The surgeons were too late. Valentino was dying.
Pola, if she does not come in time, tell her I think of her.
He was unable to finish. On August 23, 1926, at noon, Rudolph Valentino was pronounced dead. Hysteria followed. In London, a female dancer committed suicide. In New York, a woman shot herself and fell across a heap of Valentino's photographs. When it was announced his body would lie in state, 30,000 women gathered at Campbell's funeral home. After a 3-day cross-country dash, Pola Negri, hysterical with grief, had to be carried into the sanctuary.
Massive candles were burning at his head and feet. In the soft light, death seemed to have conferred a serenity on his features. He appeared at last to have found the tranquility that had eluded him for most of his life. From the empty depths of my own sorrow, I could almost be happy for him. I knelt beside the coffin and prayed that his soul might find eternal peace. I'll never forget. Adieu, Rudy, mon bien-aimé.
By 1927, America was enjoying an era of unprecedented sexual emancipation. However, the word sex was still not allowed, at least not in the movies. So British novelist Eleanor Glynn coined a new term, it.
To have it, the fortunate possessor must have that strange magnetism which attracts both sexes. He or she must be entirely unself-conscious and indifferent to the effect he or she is producing. There must be physical attraction, but beauty is unnecessary. Conceit destroys it immediately. Eleanor Glynn.
It became the rage, and Paramount quickly imported Miss Glynn to concoct a screenplay. Cast in the lead was a vivacious, devil-may-care young starlet, Clara Bow.
Clara danced even when her feet were not moving. Some part of her was always in motion, if only her big, rolling eyes. Adolf Zucker, founder, Paramount Studios.
The sultry vamp was suddenly passé. In her place came a naughty but nice girl next door, the fun-loving flapper. It grossed more than $1 million, and Clara was hailed as the screen's most piquant star.
Clara's sex was the sex of sensuous touch. You could feel her flesh on the screen. Billy Wilder.
Like Gloria Swanson and Pola Negri before her, in real life, Clara Bow more than matched her screen personality.
The big joke in Hollywood was that Clara laid everything but the linoleum. Actor Regis Toomey.
Toward the end of her career, Miss Bow's alleged propensity for drink, drugs, and gigolos left her mired in scandal. By the time one of her spurned lovers tried to kill himself, she could only muster scorn.
When a man attempts suicide over a woman, he don't cut his wrists with a safety razor blade, then drape himself over a couch with a cigarette between his lips. No, They don't do it that way. They use pistols. Clara Bow.
On trial for attempting suicide, the wretch testified that Clara had once kissed him so fervently that he was laid up with an aching jaw for 2 days. The press had a field day with Clara's private life, and the star eventually had a nervous breakdown, finally retreating to a sanitarium.
Being a sex symbol is a heavy load to carry, especially when one is very tired, hurt, and bewildered.
In 1951, still in a sanitarium, Clara fondly recalled her glory days.
We did as we pleased. We stayed up late. We dressed the way we wanted. I'd whiz down Sunset Boulevard in my open kissel with 7 red chow dogs to match my hair. Today's stars are sensible and end up with better health. Ah, but we had more fun. Clara Bow.
In 1920s Berlin, cabaret culture was in the heyday of its decadent splendor. But unlike the carefree jubilation of the American jazz age, the tone there was considerably darker. Sigmund Freud was the talk of the town, and Germany's leading filmmaker, G.W. Pabst, was exploring psychosexual issues.
Pabst was conducting an investigation into his relations with women. He was not aroused by sexual love. It was sexual hate that engrossed his whole being. Louise Brooks.
In Pandora's Box, Herr Pabst cast the slow-eyed American beauty Louise Brooks as a murderous nymphomaniac Lulu. After killing her husband on their wedding night, she runs away with a lesbian, who she also dispatches. One foggy night, Lulu picks up a young man and takes him to her room. The fellow turns out to be Jack the Ripper, who stabs her to death during the throes of passion. Too disturbing for mainstream audiences, these expressionist nightmares had little effect on American filmmaking, with the possible exception of a continental sophisticate, Erich von Stroheim.
Von Stroheim is at once superb and pathetic, an artist with integrity, a supreme contempt for conventions, and a disastrous inability to be practical. Film critic Catherine Delaroche.
Known as the man you love to hate, von Stroheim's world was one of decadence, in which the perverse and bizarre were commonplace.
A madman is in charge. Gloria Swanson.
Studio chiefs were quick to note America's enthusiasm for European sensibilities, and Hollywood's moguls began combing the continent in search of undiscovered talent. In Germany, Louis B. Mayer would find Greta Garbo. He offered her a contract and some advice.
In America, men don't like fat women. And get your teeth fixed. L.B. Mayer.
What Garbo brought to the screen was sexual mystery.
I accidentally bumped into her on the stairwell one day, and my knees got weak. She was breathtaking. If I ever thought of becoming a lesbian, this was it. Joan Crawford.
Miss Garbo's special awareness of the secrets of love was hinted at in hundreds of ways in every film she made, although never quite so boldly as in Flesh and the Devil.
Greta Garbo is the epitome of pulchritude, the personification of passion. Frankly, never in our screen career have we seen seduction so perfectly done. New York Herald Tribune.
Cast opposite Miss Garbo was a high-strung, intensely romantic screen idol, John Gilbert. Following Rudolph Valentino's death, Jack, as he was known to friends, had become the screen's most celebrated lover.
I just remember him as a hysterical fellow, Eleanor Boardman.
According to director Clarence Brown, Greta Garbo and John Gilbert fell in love the moment they met.
their scenes together, I was working with raw material. They were in the blissful state of love, which is so like a rosy cloud that they imagine themselves hidden behind it. Clarence Brown.
The liaison was as brief as it was passionate. Following a hasty marriage proposal, Garbo left Gilbert, literally standing at the altar.
I would rather spend an hour with Greta than a lifetime with any other woman. John Gilbert.
The great lover was devastated, and most Hollywood historians mark this day as the beginning of his tragic decline.
His performance in Queen Christina was catastrophic. He began drinking more and more. He lost his money and his house, just as he had lost 4 wives and countless girlfriends. He tried to commit suicide several times, but finally died of a heart attack in 1936. Greta Garbo.
Once the very essence of the silent movie star, when John Gilbert died, his obituary would warrant only a tiny space in the back pages of an industry trade paper. His tragic decline would come to symbolize the end of the silent film era. In its first quarter century, the motion picture moved from sideshow to center stage. Film had become the most popular and most powerful form of communication on the planet. With the coming of sound, all things seemed possible. It had all begun with a kiss, and where it would end, no one dared imagine.